Well, you always have to find they're all better they're on sheet ice.
That one truck down line.
Yeah, I think so.
I was in I stopped in Georgetown at that little overrated. Thank God I drove off.
Well, it looks like, I think everybody's back in from the hall. I want to thank you all for being patient. The schedule doesn't always work out with how much actually people have to say, so that's just all there is to it. But I want to thank Pam Monsees for being here, Office of Information Technology, also with CCSA, and she's going to be talking a little bit about CCSA, CCNC, and the legislative initiatives of those groups.
Thanks, Daryl. Thanks for asking me to come. I really am not going to take much of your time. I think Daryl probably could have just kind of scratched this last part and no one would have missed it. But I am Pam Monsees. I come from your, there are many, many familiar faces here from my 911 community of friends for 25 plus years. I have since transitioned to...
I hate to interrupt. Can you slow down just a little bit, please? I can't keep up with you.
I'll try to do that. I
Thank
apologize. I didn't realize you were over there busy with your hands. So right now, what Daryl has asked me to speak to is any of the pending legislative issues that could affect the 911 community coming out of the CCSA or the Consolidated Communications System Authority. That authority was created through legislation, obviously in 2012, and it created a 20-member authority to oversee the possible funding issues and funding streams for the digital trunk, the statewide digital trunk radio system, of which probably many of you are part of, I would say, the majority. So that group has been tasked with trying to, and I'm sure those of you that have been around are aware that the funding issues have plagued the statewide system for a number of years. The state has done several upgrades system-wide to the network, but the legislature is not consistent with their funding. So it was the plan of the JBC, who sponsored the bill in 2012, to create an authority to gain exposure to the need for that funding, and for that group to try to find some possible funding streams. They're to report to the governor and the General Assembly on or before October 15th of every year, so they just made their presentation to the JBC. Actually, last week on Thursday night, they made their annual presentation. The JBC was certainly open to all the conversation and to the report. They, of course, anything that requires budget is politically not very well received, but nonetheless, we are gaining at least some of the exposure that we need to make it a little more of a priority for them. So that was a good thing. Daryl also asked me to speak on what the difference is between the CCNC and the CCSA in the alphabet soup world that we live in. And the CCNC has been around since about 1998, I believe. And that's the Consolidated Communications Network of Colorado. So, and that is a users group that's made up of all the users that share and use the statewide DTR system. So the difference is they're kind of an overseer users group as compared to the CCSA, who has been tasked with kind of trying to go out and figure out a way to fund this giant monster of a system. So it's a huge task that they've been asked to undertake, and no one knows how successful they're going to be, but we all have hopes that at least the exposure will make the legislature more aware of the need and the priority of the system. Legislatively, House Bill 12...
Can I just ask you before you move on?
Yes,
Who owns the infrastructure of DTR? Is it,
lots and lots of people.
okay, so it isn't CC?
No, CCNC, members of CCNC are partners and co-owners, if you will, of infrastructure. The state currently owns and manages 3 of the zone controllers. And PPRCN, which is Pikes Peak Regional, own a 4th zone controller. Pueblo County, through the CSEP, which is chemical destruction for the chemical depot down there, have got a grant to add a 6th zone controller in Pueblo, which will expand the system pretty dramatically down there. So ownership is a partnership, and hence that creates some of the problems with trying to find a funding stream, because the legislature looks at the local infrastructure as local responsibility, but the infrastructure everyone has access to. So when the locals invest in it, they're making it available for all of the users that are in the area. And with Colorado being a home rule state, local control is critical. So, and nobody's trying to make any changes to that. So the CCSA is not allowed to, through their means of trying to find funding streams, they're not allowed to levy any taxes or fees on any of the local governments. So they're looking more at sunsetting taxes or fees that are already in place to perhaps support the system, or other means for the legislature to identify for how to help create a sustainable amount of funding. What has happened is, over the years, the system has been allowed to fall behind in software upgrades, to the point where then when we did go in last year, we were so far behind that it was a huge amount of money that we had to ask for to bring it up just to the current level, which we're in the process right now of a $13.9 million upgrade system-wide. And we've finished phase 1 of that, taken it from system release 7.5 to 7.7. We have another jump that's going to start in December. That'll take it to 7.11. And then by May, we'll be at 7.14, which will be the newest release. But we don't want the legislature to fall into a complacency that they think that now they've given us some money, they don't have to keep looking at it, which tends to be the problem. You go back in, they say, well, we just gave you money. Yes, but it's not over. So as far as legislation, 1224 was created, and that CCSA was tasked with just seeking funding in support of the statewide digital trunk radio system. We have other regional systems of systems, and currently we know that there's a new break-off with the Front Range Communications Consortium, which currently consists of 2 counties, as well as the Denver EDAC system. And those other systems have come in and said, hey, if we're gonna start looking at the legislature finding funding for one system, we'd like to amend that legislation and broaden it to include all of the systems. So I know that the CCSA has asked in their report for someone to champion that amendment to that bill to include all of the systems, especially if they look at some kind of a statewide funding mechanism. Then it's only fair if your citizens don't use the DTR system, similar to like the Denver EDACs, but they're expected to pay, that they should have access to funds. So as far as up to today, that's the only pending legislation that I know of that could be coming down the pipe, is for them to change or amend 1224 to include all public safety radio systems. So.
And 1224 is an existing
It
bill?
is
Senate
existing.
or House or?
It's already signed.
Oh,
It's-
okay.
It's
So
legislation.
it was done in the last session? Gotcha.
It was in 2012.
Okay, well, 2000.
Right. So they've been in place, they had their first meeting in October of 2000.
Oh, that was the creative.
Right.
Gotcha.
So initially, when they met and started up their organization, they had to draft bylaws and mission and vision and objectives and all those things. And so they spent some time organizing, and now they have actually presented their their report to the JBC. And they were certainly, the JBC is aware, and I think that this gave them a greater awareness of the priority of the Public Safety Radio Network. But again, the funding piece is political, and none of them want to reach out and tell anybody they're gonna make a new fee or tax them or something. So you can't get any kind of a feel for where they're gonna go with that. But that's the only pending legislation that I'm aware of. Are there any questions?
The main reason, or one of the reasons why I invited CCSA to come speak about their legislative initiatives is there was a draft annual report that came out. I know it's still, at least the last version I saw was a draft from CCSA board. Do you know what I'm talking about?
That's probably what they presented.
Okay, and in the executive summary, it sounds like that might be what you're talking about. The summary recommended that legislation be pursued to expand the purpose of the CCSA. So is that what you were talking about when you were talking about
Including all the
including
systems.
the other non-DTR systems?
Right.
Okay.
Who's on the board, or how did they make up the? I was just wondering who was on the board, or how they made that selection. Are they technical, or are they operational, or are they
Yes.
nothing?
They're technical, they're operational, they're elected. It's a 20-member group. Applications were asked for that, and we do have a couple commissioners. We have some users. The tribes are represented on there as well, although they don't send representation very well. When they drafted the bill, they included, and I'm sorry I didn't bring a copy of the bill, I wasn't expecting that question. One member from each of the 5 regional MAC areas, which is the mutual aid channel regions. So there's MAC representation, there is representation from the zone controller, which would be your major infrastructure. There is, there's Eric, and he was apparently Daryl wasn't able to get a hold of you, they were running a little ahead of schedule.
Okay.
So.
You're just in time.
Yeah, you're just in time, I can turn it over to you and you can finish. It's made up pretty broadly, and actually I could distribute, if I had an email list from here, Daryl, I could distribute that membership of the CCSA out. So it is pretty broad, and it's regionally very diverse. The governor made sure that, and it was not, this governor I think signed that one, that it was not just representative of the Front Range or just the more populated areas, but it's geographically diverse. So there's someone from every region on there. Their meetings are held once a month, and they're generally the day before the CCNC meeting, so that people that have to travel don't have to travel twice. They can come in on the Thursday, attend the CCSA, and then attend CCNC the next morning. And there are, obviously there are state representatives on there as well. I'm not actually a member of the CCSA, but I sit on the Education and Outreach Committee on there. Eric Harper from the Department of Natural Resources, Parks and Wildlife is a member of the CCSA. So he would also be a good resource for anyone to ask any questions about this.
And it also might be helpful for those who don't know to kind of run through who all uses the system. It's not just law enforcement, fire, EMS, but there's others on the system.
It's a very broad bunch of users on the system. It is pretty much all the public safety, law, fire, and EMS. There are also a host of public utilities that are on there, and we have infrastructure owners that are public utilities. School districts are huge users because they enjoy the statewide interoperability of it. They can take a busload of wrestlers to a tournament in Grand Junction from someplace in Denver, and when they get to Grand Junction, they can still talk to home on the radio. So
Is an RTD a big
RTD is a huge user of the system. In fact, they're expanding. They're going to be adding a couple of sites out towards DIA, and they probably right now are the largest user of the system, and they've actually added a lot of infrastructure. And they use it to a much greater detail than even the public safety do. So that would pretty much encompass most, obviously OEM, emergency management, all use it. The RETACs have their own top groups on there.
The CSP,
All the state
the
agencies.
feds,
Federal agencies, yes, to a degree. We have a really tight working relationship with a lot of the federal agencies. I know that there's, the wildland fires create a whole different scenario. So when we do have big wildland fire, the Forest Service does bring in VHF systems, and they bring in all their own stuff, and they set up their own stuff in the mountains, and they run everything off their VHF. But they still have to be interoperable with the DTR on the system, because it does provide that interoperability. So with the break off of these other systems and the Denver EDAC system, Lakewood has their own, Arvada has their own, Westminster just bought a new switch from a vendor that is pretty green with switches, and so we're hoping that we can get all of these things pulled together so that we have interoperability with everyone. When the state system gets to system release 7.14 in April or May, we're hoping to be able to implement what's called ISSI 8000. That's a Motorola product on our Motorola side, and it's a patching of disparate systems. So hopefully everybody will be able to do that, very similar to how the Network First works with Denver right now. And any of you that are from the Front Range know about the Network First piece.
and could you maybe speak to how the state and OIT kind of oversee or control day-to-day bandwidth and operation of the system? I used to get those phone calls when somebody would patch the wrong.
The DTR monitoring team does watch the system just for system health more than anything else. And so they're monitoring for, I don't want to speak out of turn for the monitoring team, but they more watch for any hiccups in the system, any drops in microwaves or channels that go down, and they do monitor that all the time. And there are also remote alarms that are set off from the sites when one of the channels goes down, or when one of the sites goes into site trunking. So they notify then whoever needs to be notified to get the correction made to them.
I used to have dispatchers who were overzealous with patching things together and would lock open a talk group or something. And,
I don't know that that's actually happened too much lately. I think that probably was a bit of a learning curve. But with the new ISSI 8000 that's going to be coming in the spring, I think there's going to be a whole new learning curve, because we're going to have more systems that need to be patched, and it's not necessarily solidly proven technology yet. So we're the state and CCNC and the statewide interoperable executive committee, the SIEC, is also pressuring the vendors to come together and test these ISSI solutions to make sure that we don't have some open loops between ISSI connections. It's very complex, and if I knew we were going to get into really technical stuff, I'd brought one of my engineers just so they could speak to that, but.
and I don't think we need to do that.
No, I just know that they're working on it.
I was just trying to get a feel for everybody of what the scope of the system is. I mean,
It's
a lot of
huge.
people don't have a grasp on how
It is very.
big it is and how ubiquitous it is.
Right now, there are 222 sites. We have about 87,000 user IDs on the network, and about 77,000 of those are push-to-talk radios.
Are what?
Push-to-talk radios.
Thank you.
And that leads to my next question with this, with that size of a system and that many users, in this funding, looking for funding, has there been any thought to, user fees or some mechanism whereby?
Jeff, I think that the legislature is gonna be wide open to anything that's gonna look like it can help support and sustain the system, but through a fair and equitable way of doing it. And trust me when I tell you that I am researching and exploring all kinds of possibilities for that. And Colorado is not alone in this problem. Probably about the middle of last week, I got an email, through an email strand through the statewide interoperability coordinators, which I am to serve in that position right now for the state as well. And it was from the SWIC in Ohio, saying, we're having trouble figuring out how to fund our statewide system. It's a mixture of a lot of stuff, and we don't know, what are the other states doing?
You might decode SWIC so everybody knows what.
That's that statewide interoperability coordinator, and each state has to have one. So it's been very interesting to me that people were replying to all on that email strand, and the responses have been incredible. You've got some states that do charge a user fee. There are actually some states out there that charge per push to talk.
Wow.
Like 20 cents per push to talk.
Oh, man.
I can see what Jefferson County might feel about a 20-cent per push to talk. It would certainly cut out the office chit chat. That would be cut dramatically. But I think that that's probably been the greatest hurdle to jump. CCNC has tried for years to come up with a fair funding mechanism. And because that's a users group, no matter what suggestion they came up with, somebody cried foul. And that same thing's gonna happen at whatever level. When you look for funding, somebody's gonna cry foul every time. So they've gotta explore.
Because this is where the intersection of us and CCNC or CCSA kind of is happening now. You know, I have agencies in my authority coming to us looking for software upgrade and other funding now.
Right.
For some huge figures right now to augment that. So
Right.
that's kind of where, you know, the intersection is. And, you know, I would hope that we could come together and figure out some mechanism to where they're not, you know, getting hit with these big bills at some point in time.
Right. When the state went out and got the 13.9 million for the statewide upgrade, the state's done 7 upgrades in the past. And there was not an issue with necessarily written agreements. CCNC this time said the state's not gonna come in and do that without a written agreement. So we had to draft written agreements, and we gave 2 options to every agency that has infrastructure, and that includes any RF sites or RF channels, or dispatch centers, or recorders actually that would be included in that. And we offered the MOU that said that the state would fund your portion of it, but that you had to agree to remain a part of the system for a period of 5 years, or else pay the state back. Just as a business sense, we're not gonna just dump that money into your system and then have you say, thank you very much, I'm leaving. And then we also gave the option for the local agencies to pay for their own, contract directly with Motorola for their portion. And we've had some agencies, Jefferson County happens to be one of them, that's decided to pay for their own. So.
Maybe we can get Eric into this a little bit, so that you didn't make the trip for nothing.
Yeah.
We were talking about, before you got here, we were talking about the legislative initiatives of the CCSA for the upcoming session. And I saw a draft annual report from CCSA talking about expanding the role of the CCSA to encompass more aspects of public safety communication. And do you, what were you, I'm sorry, I'm not speaking real well right now. Were you one of the co-authors of that report?
I was not one of the
Okay.
co-authors. I am an actual member of the CCSA board, and it was approved by the entire board, actually unanimously. So the thought of that is partially that it's a very large amount of money, we're aware of that, and that there's a large percentage of, and I think there's 2 different terms. There's the users who actually use the system, then there's the beneficiaries of the system, which is everybody in the state and every visitor of the state. Because without the system, the way it operates right now, CDOT doesn't function, State Patrol doesn't function, and even in the city of Denver, CDOT still plows I-25, CDOT plows I-70. So there's a benefit to everybody. But trying to bring the whole population together for a better interoperable solution, to bring the Denver system and the Lakewood system and the Westminster system, and fund, even if you're not funding the individual system, but coming up with a funding source that funds the wide area system, but also all of those connections from the other separate systems for interoperability purposes. The other thing that I think is important, and just to give you a little background about myself, I actually was a 911 dispatcher in Grand Junction 21 years ago. Then I was involved in volunteer fire and EMS in 5 different counties in the state. So I've been a user from the small, tiny agency with a tiny budget all the way through, and obviously now I work for Colorado Parks and Wildlife and I'm based here in Denver. But we need to figure out how to let everybody talk together. And we see those problems happen routinely, and we have an interoperable problem, but we also have an operations problem for the people who have to go everywhere. Our agency is actually the only state agency that's responsible for having a person responsible for every square inch of ground in the state. So I have to be able to send somebody to every square inch of ground in the state and have them hopefully be able to communicate back if there's an emergency or whatever. So as the system changes and improves, we hope that there's an ability to talk from basically everywhere in this state. And that if systems are breaking out and things, we can make a way that my radio, if I go to Weld County, will still work. Because they are separating from the system. They're creating their own, and we need an interoperability and an operability piece for those people who have to roam all over the place. So those are kind of some of the things that we're looking at, but the emphasis is coming up with that funding, and because the population base, which means the money also, and the votes in the legislature, is largely along the Front Range, and much of that area is not a primary state DTR user, then we need to figure out a way to make it a benefit to them as well. I think it is anyway, but we need to be able to show that benefit to them. Most of those people, certainly not all, but most of those people do leave their local areas and they go to other places where DTR is a primary user. But then, as I said, if there's a major event, the resources come from all over the place, and this is the one system that kind of brings things together from across the state. And we need to figure out how to continue to fund that.
And this would be for either of you. Do you think that there may be any opposition to the legislative push to expand the role of the CCSA?
I don't think so.
I don't think there'll be significant opposition to expand the role of CCSA to trying to find that funding. I think anytime you're asking for money, there's always opposition.
Sure.
But as far as expanding the role, and as long as we're explaining that we're trying to improve that interoperability statewide, I don't think that there'll be significant opposition to that. It'll be as we move forward beyond that to actually trying to find that funding source. There's always opposition to that, no matter how you do it.
You know, we were talking earlier today about some possible legislative initiatives of the 911 community. You know, and here we're hearing about the legislative initiatives of the state radio system, or the authority that helps oversee that. What do you think the possibility would be of some sort of collaboration or working together on part of both communities to helping to move both initiatives along.
I can't speak obviously for the whole group. I think personally that because the missions are similarly aligned, that it would make a lot of sense to try to tie that together, because the beneficiaries of both systems are the general public and the visitors that come to the state. And I think using that as the tie together, it makes sense to figure out a way to improve both systems to make the service better for everybody. You have any?
Any other
I agree.
questions?
In your search for funding, are you gonna be looking at 911 money for funding?
No.
No, we have not considered 911 money for funding. We have said that the 911 funding model may be something that we want to consider a model similar to that, but not coming to 911 and asking for funding. So that has been discussed as that it's one potential type of funding stream, but it's not coming to 911.
It's not an option.
Okay, good. What effect, if any?
We know that.
What effect, if any, does it have on the state system that Adams County and Wilton County are getting their own switch?
Basically, there's going to be some coverage changes. Most of those areas are covered fairly well by state sites as well. There's a couple of sites that we're concerned about, and in particular my agency is concerned about. State Patrol did testing and found that those sites on the state highways don't affect a whole lot. But I'm a little concerned as they go away that it may affect our people a little bit more. But the biggest thing is to be able to do that interoperability, and especially if we get high volume events, we need to tie those two systems together with that ISSI system so that we can move people back and forth across those systems. And that's a pretty critical connection, I think, as the system moves forward and they're both upgraded to the point where they're capable of that.
So in that scenario, if you are able to interconnect and you're squawking on your primary talk group, then if you roam into their system, would it be transparent, hopefully, for you?
Part of that is going to depend, from my understanding from Motorola Users Group meeting last week, on the subscriber radio. And honestly, with my radios, it will not be transparent because my radios are old and are not capable of the automatic roaming. But if you have an up-to-date radio that can be programmed such, it is possible to have an automatic roaming feature. But even if you have an old radio with a talk group change, you can make it possible. And it would be just change talk groups, and then that would route back through your dispatch. So you have basically your roaming channel that connects to your primary channel.
Which is easy to do when you're running code 39.
No, not so much, man.
And I need to quantify that just a little bit. Automatic roaming through the ISSI 8000 also requires an upgrade of all of the RF sites from Quantar repeaters to the GTR series of repeaters. That's probably quite a ways into the very distant future because of the cost associated for anybody that's got infrastructure that still has those Quantar repeaters. Those all have to be replaced for automatic roaming to take place. Manual roaming can happen as soon as the ISSI is put into place. That's a matter of just a button switch on your radio.
What, if any, intersection is there with CCNC, CCSA, and FirstNet? Or is it really completely separate since they're totally data and you guys are strictly voice?
The interconnect is gonna probably be that FirstNet's gonna wanna use all of the infrastructure, the tower sites that are in place to install their LTE equipment. Beyond that, that's probably until LTE actually evolves into, right now they can't provide voice, so it is strictly data. So until that evolves to a point where they can guarantee the public safety requirements for the broadband, it'll still be LMR versus LTE.
Is that a possible potential funding source for you if they have to pay to use some of your infrastructure?
At the state level, probably not,
It's too bad.
probably not. The local level, like the locals can come up with whatever funding stream they want. Because FirstNet's gonna be looking at everybody's infrastructure. Whatever fiber you have in the ground, whatever towers you have up, they're looking at every potential place to stick a node, stick a site, because LTE requires about 10 times the amount of transmitter sites that LMR does. At least 10 times the amount. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And Daryl, you might just, I don't know how technically adept everybody is here. We're talking land mobile radio, which is their system, versus long-term evolution LTE, in essence 4G cellular, so everybody knows.
Basically data versus voice.
Right.
Any other questions for Pam or Eric?
Another question, but can I share something? Maybe Jeff wants to come, or Eric. The Front Range Communications Consortium is holding an interoperability meeting, open to anybody who'd like to attend. It's next Friday at 9 o'clock at the Southwest Substation in Will County. It's off of I-25. If you want more information, just come see me.
Okay.
Thank you.
I stopped there a lot, there's a great Qdoba there.
Good to know.
Anybody else? Well, I think one of the reasons I wanted to have you guys here today was to let us know, because I knew you had some legislative initiatives that I thought would be pertinent to our discussion, learn more about that. But one of the keys to being effective in legislative outreach is having a strong team of, what's the word I'm looking for? Collaborators, you know, other organizations that you can work with to help each other bring your initiatives forward. And to the extent that, like Eric said, our missions are aligned, we're here in support of public safety and public safety communications. I was hoping that maybe we could start dialogue on that, and you know, this would be just a first meeting, and maybe this is going to be an annual event, so maybe every year when we do our 911 Goes to Denver, we can have you guys come and we can continue this dialogue and have a back and forth.
What are the chances that you can make the 911 Goes to Denver a little more like the 911 Goes to Washington and get some meetings with local legislators?
Oh, you missed it. There was one here today.
Really? Very good. Very good. Came here.
Yes.
Who was it?
Gene Nicholson.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, I invited
Very
10. 3 said they would come, and 1 showed up, so.
Well, next year invite 20. and
There you go,
maybe you'll-
exactly.
Or maybe.
Now we know the ratios.
Or maybe the one that came today can go back and say, hey, you guys really need to
Exactly.
get there. And
Exactly.
that word of mouth may be very productive for you to start these meetings face to face with those people, so that it's not just a suggestion or an email or a newsletter, but it's a face to face where they have to answer and make that eye contact and say, no, we can't, or we'll do what we can. They're looking for the votes. They want to satisfy their constituent.
Any final comments? Anybody on the phone? Okay, well, thank you very much for being here today. I really appreciate
Oh,
it.
you're very welcome.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Well, we did have kind of a, boy, this thing's scratchy. I'll use this one instead when it turns on. There we go. We did have an abbreviated schedule today, and I apologize for underestimating or overestimating how much time we would need. But on the plus side, you get more of your afternoon, right? So, but I do want to thank you for coming. Again, I know it was difficult with all the construction out there and everything. If you found this useful, please tell your colleagues to come and participate next year. If you didn't find it useful, tell me how we can try to make it more useful, and we'll do our best to try to make this a worthwhile event for you so that we can grow it. I think when it comes to things like legislative initiatives or legislative outreach, really numbers is one of the biggest assets you can have in your toolkit. So the more we grow our numbers, the more people we get involved in this, the more effective we'll be as a community in trying to affect the types of changes that we need. So thank you for participating. You're the ones that are making the difference, and I'll see most of you at the next task force meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks both for each other. And could you stay for a little while? Thanks for the tour. Tour. Yeah, sure.
Okay, Daryl.
If you want, we can go. What's her name? Tracy.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have any. Sure.
Oh, you saw it? Yes.
We have to run the webcast.
Let's see.
Okay, because my agenda is on
Don't ask. I don't have a paper copy. Hi guys, drive careful. Bye. See you next By the time it starts.
Look at another size. And you might wonder if we're gonna vote on this. That's our latest one, that's up for final.
Yeah.
Look at, I found I have another copy.
This one's going with me. It's right here.
Jennifer will, ask when we get to the agenda, when we do the roll call. Bring the updates. So they did.
Oh, good.
Yeah, she's the new Walker County person.
He's sitting through that.
I can't even tell.
For your, meeting on Friday, do you need an
You did.
Actually, we sent it out, Sean must have it, but no, just show up. And Sean must have the information.
Okay.
Right, so we went out to Adcom Thornton and all of our, Broomfield. Because you guys go Broomfield Dispatch, North Central Fire, right? North Fire, North Fire, North Fire. You do?
No, Broomfield does.
Broomfield, yeah, so I went to them because of that, because we interact with them. Come on by. You know where that building is? Off of, you would exit I-25 North, exit 119, and then that, go to the frontage road, that first right. You exit 119 and go right. Okay. The first left. Okay. Kind of turns around into, it almost looks like there's a lake in front, it's like a CSP station.
Oh, okay.
Here's,
It's right back
this is
now.
the chat screen.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
This is just,
Good job, Daryl.
thank you very much, I really appreciate it.
Call in, okay?
See you next time. We need you to vote.
Okay, all right, bye-bye.
If you go to groups and committees, training standards committee, just leave it right on this page. Anything you want to look at, just click on it from this page. And you'll get what you want to look at. I'll take one, so you pull that up. And if you go to this page, say share my screen. You see it says it's call taking. If I still had this open, you can see that it's showing this inside that little window on the other screen. So as long as you're on this screen and see it says stop sharing at the top, that's how you know it's still sharing. So as long as that red button's up there, you know that it's going out over the webcast. You can do whatever you want on this page.
Question,
And
concerns?
I'm going to sign out of me, so you won't be able to edit, but you'll still be able to look at it.
Kids love.
Does that make sense? Just because I got everything, my whole life is there.
And
Here, so from here, even though I'm signed out, those are public, so you can still see them, you can still go in the other comments. So yeah, if you just make notes of all the changes and edits and send them to me in an email, or I can give one of you access to go in. I just don't want everybody to be able to go in. No. But I can give you, really should give you and Kim access to every member.
I was thinking,
If you
at
don't
the
want to,
side
just
of
send them, and I'll make the edits. That's fine.
Billy,
The less interaction I have with that, the best.
the bottom has to be tight, you can write them out. Yeah.
And then, what is your equipment that we need to corral up for you?
The only thing I'm gonna leave is this. So it's this, there's an extension mic hooked up to it, it's everything that's connected to it. So if you just, it's plugged in back over there.
Okay, and you're gonna take your video?
I'm gonna take all that stuff. So the only thing
So here's
you'll,
what our game plan is to send this home with Kim, Carol. So
And
we'll
then-
stay in the Denver metro area.
and then,
We would love to see you in the western half of the state, but
and then I'll just have to go down and visit Kim and pick it up. Sounds good. Yeah, that's fine.
And I was serious.
Well, I see you live into the seat,
Yeah, well, now that we've broken the 911 goes to Denver is not in Denver anymore. Now we're really in gold, might as well. Might get some more legislators there.
love your package, by the way, Darryl.
Oh, thank you. The legislative packet? Good.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is a great
Good.
job.
I'm glad. You know, like I said, I wasn't real happy with the quality of the folders that I did, so.
We'll be postponing it to next meeting, the December meeting.
Yeah, I just have too many things on my schedule, so.
One long distance,
Parking? Yeah, that was terrible. I got here like, oh, they're still working on this?
Not only that, but it's worse.
It is, yeah. Well, I gave Jeff a hard time. I said, you know, they opened up Highway 36 between Loveland and Estes Park. That's a highway along a river in a canyon that's completely washed out by flood. They did that in a month and a half. They've been working on this for like 6 months.
stops you.
Oh, that guy that they had the sentencing hearings for, he cried.
Yeah, we get all close.
He cried.
That's what it says.
I wouldn't think that he had enough human emotions to cry.
He says he was. Hello? Consider it. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah?
Oh yeah, I imagine she would cry.
Where you? Yeah, we're in between our second and third meeting. So we're coming up on the last meeting of the day. But it doesn't start till 4:30, so we're gonna hang out here in this courtroom and bullshit and goof off until 4:30. So, I thought I'd call and see how you were. Good. How's the weather there? Good. Did Ed go paint? Okay. Okie dokie. Yeah. Okay, I was just calling to say hi. I know you're surfing, I'll let you go surf. Okay.
Jennifer.
Yeah.
Here's the box
Yeah.
that goes with the.
Just a long turn.
Oh, good.
It's seen better days, but
Yeah,
yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, sweetheart.
Joe.
He finds too much shit to do on the internet, man.
Oh, this is just the first day of that.
Is he buying stuff or is it just?
Dude, when our construction was going crazy and we had money rolling in like mad, I swear to God, the UPS driver was at my house almost every damn day. It was freaking crazy.
Yeah, I get because I order so much through Amazon that it's
Yeah.
like.
Well, I got my notice from Amazon and one of my things I ordered just delivered to my, do you have that service?
Yeah.
I actually think that's really cool what they do. And did you see in the big cities, they're gonna do Sunday delivery
Yeah.
with the US Postal Service?
Because a lot of times there's like, I mean, I'll order stuff instead of going to Walmart and get it.
Yeah, I get to go for my long walk back to my car.
A long way to go?
I'm not as bad as, our bar park over by Coastal Services. Our park over there on the north side, I was a little bit closer. You did a good job there.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's just odd. Just odd.
How is your grandson?
He's doing swell, thank you.
Is he?
Yeah,
Yeah?
he's a trooper.
Good.
He's over 8 pounds now.
Oh.
He had dropped below, he's only 4.5 pounds. Yeah. He has a aortic dissection. So they clamped both ends of his aorta and they took out the centerpiece that was closed. And he was 2 weeks old. It's amazing.
You know, every time I hear about one of those, you know, a surgery that complex on a baby, you just kind of go, oh my God. You know, how phenomenal that they can do it, first of all.
Well, I know him right now, but he is,
Yeah,
my
picture?
daughter's due on December 6th. They went through his back. They went through his back, they separated his ribs, and they went through and took care of it. And they waited the entire surgical team. They were waiting on one surgery because the amount of clamp time is what's incredibly important. It is the least amount of clamp time. Across the nation, it's about 20 to 22 minute clamping. And he's got the effort down to about 12. He was able to do Mason with 13 minutes clamp. That's it. It was a 3-hour surgery with the actual clamp off.
Right.
Which is the critical part of the
Right,
surgery.
and probably what's helped makes the success of it so.
And recovery. So, but he's gaining weight and he's starting to coo and smile. So,
Excellent. So you're gonna have a good Christmas.
It'll
yeah,
ask for
my daughter
a
had
code, it's just
her
2,
own,
and it'll say start
Well, they'll be kind of boring this Christmas. Wait till next Christmas. They'll be much
Their
more.
stockings are hanging.
Yeah.
Gifts are in the stockings, and then of course I started with all the crazy ones.
Yeah.
My husband says this is never gonna end, is it?
Nope, not until I'm in the ground. I never had kids, but when I married my husband, he had kids from his first marriage, so I was lucky enough to experience all of the grandkids, and now we're having great grandkids.
I think you use the microphone.
Yeah. Oh no, I look fabulous for my age. Really, I do.
The whole thing is
And,
back there instead of coming up to
I
Daryl and
helped,
Jeff.
we helped
so.
raise the grandkids because both of the boys were divorced and got their kids, so all of them lived with us at one point. So 4 kids, 2 adults, and my husband was like, I didn't sign on for this
You saw
shit.
Jim, he was sitting in the last
Yeah.
But it was
seat,
crazy,
back
but
row.
now we're having great grandkids, and it's,
I got my 30-year-old, I got my 28-year-old, which was born in September. Both of them, of course, married through college and everything, and I was an empty nester with my husband for about 3 years when Trinity came around.
yeah,
So, yeah, so my world is upside down.
yeah, it gets kind of crazy.
Upside down, inside out.
Are we gonna go for 2 hours, do you think?
No,
Oh, heck no.
No.
I would be surprised if we made it
because
an
the
hour.
equipment is leaving me for 2 hours. Yeah, I don't think
I
I
think
can
we'll
do
be an
that.
hour.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking since Daryl
She's
won't
like,
be here to talk or
"Yay!"
anything, yeah.
Thank you for those of you guys that are hanging out with us.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm trying to convince them to move down here.
Party's up in the front.
The party is in the front.
So,
There is another extension mic in here.
Look at
It
you.
might help with the sound if you're not gonna use the mics.
No, I'm gonna make everybody move down here.
do we know everything?
I'm not giving up.
Yeah. You don't have to. Daryl will have it rehearsed so I can get you back your stuff.
Yeah. I come down to Denver so often, it won't be a problem. Yeah, I wish I could stay. I am. Thank you. Not yet.